Code Explained says hi. Today we're going to create a calculator using JavaScript. Using this calculator, the user can make some simple mathematical operations like this. He can also clear the calculator by clicking on this C button. Also, when the user make a mistake, he can delete the last thing he typed in and continue. Also, when the result of an operation is a large number, so in this case our calculator will not be able to show the whole number in this little box, so our calculator will format the result like this. So this looks a very simple calculator, but trust me, you will learn a lot of things in the way. So stick with me until the end. Let's go. So of course, like always, we're not going directly to type in our code. Instead, we're going to see the logic behind it first. So for the HTML part, we're going to need an output and an input element. Inside the output element, we have there an element called operation and another element called result to show the result when the user clicks and calculate. So for the code, it's going to be a div with the class name calculator, then calc container. Inside we have the output and the input. Inside the output, it's going to be a div with the class name operation, and then inside a div with the class name value. This is where we show the operation, and here it's going to be another div with the class name result, and inside a div with the class name value, and this is where we show result, and by default it's going to be 0. And then we're going to change the inner HTML of these divs here, of these elements, using JavaScript. So we need to select these elements here, right? So for that, I'm going to use the querySelector method that takes in a CSS selector. In this case, it's going to be a class name. So I'm going to say dot class name. So the elements we're going to select here are operation and result and input. So as you can see here, the input element is empty. There is no buttons. All these buttons here are going to be created using JavaScript. So let's go and create those buttons. So to create the buttons, I first need to create an array called calculator buttons. So inside this array, we're going to put all these buttons, and these buttons are objects. Every object has as properties a name, a symbol, and formula, and a type. For example, here the delete button, its name is going to be delete, the symbol is going to be this symbol here, and the formula is going to be false, and the type is going to be a key. So here the delete button and the clear button, the type is key. For example, here for the multiplication here, its name is going to be multiplication. The symbol is going to be this symbol, but formula it's going to be an asterisk. And then the type is going to be an operator. So this one here, this one, and this one, and this one are all of type operator. For example, here for the number 8, it's going to be, the name is going to be an 8, the symbol is going to be an 8, the formula is going to be an 8, the type is going to be a number. And then the last one is going to be for the calculate button, the symbol here, the formula, and its type. It's going to be calculate. So in general, we have 4 types of buttons: key, operator, number, and calculate. Now for the symbol here is what we show for the user, and the formula is what we use to do the calculation. Now the last thing is we're going to put these buttons here inside a row, and each row is a div with the class name row, and each row has 4 buttons. The same thing for these, every 4 buttons are inside a div with the class name row. So now to create the buttons, I'm going to create a constant called buttons per row is 4, so every row has 4 buttons, and then all I need to do is loop over all my buttons inside my calculator dash buttons array. And for that I'm going to use a forEach method. This forEach method will take in a callback function, and that function takes in as parameters the button and its index. And then this is what will happen inside my function here. So I will go for the first button inside my array here. The button will be the delete button and its index is 0. So the first thing is adding the button to the row. I'm going to say row.innerHTML plus equal sign. So I'm going to add 4 buttons to this row. That's why I'm going to use the plus equal sign. And the code here is going to be the code for a button. It has here an ID. The ID of that button, it's going to be just its name. So I'm going to say button.name. And then what we're going to show to the user is the button.symbol, which is this one here. Now this code here will create the button for us. And then after adding the button, I'm going to increment the added buttons by 1. Before, this added buttons here is set equal to 0. Now it's going to be equal to 1. Remember, this is a loop, so I'm going to go to the next button. Now its index, it's going to be 1, the next one. Here I'm going to add that button to the inner HTML of the row. And then the added buttons now is going to be 2. Then we go to the next button. We add that button to the row. Added buttons now is 3. We then go to the next button. We add that button to the row. And now the added buttons is going to be 4. Now you can see here that the row is filled, so we need to add a new row so we can add the next button to it. So I'm going to say here, before adding the new button, I'm going to say input element that inner HTML plus equal a div with the class name row. But I will add row to our input element just in one case, and only if I added 4 buttons to the last row. So this is gonna be an if statement. Now let's first talk about the modulo operator. So for example, if I say 5 divided by 4, 5 has only one 4 in it. So it's gonna be 1, but there is a remainder which is gonna be 1. Now if I say 5 modulo 4, it's gonna be 1. Not this one here, but it's gonna be the remainder. So the modulo operator here returns the remainder of the division of 2 numbers. So in our case, we have 0 modulo 4. 0 is the number of added buttons, and 4 is going to be the buttons per row. So 0 modulo 4 is going to be equal to 0, and this is the case when we start the forEach method. Now after adding 4 buttons to the first row, now the added button is going to be equal to 4. Again, for modulo 4, it's going to be equal 0. So 4 divided by 4, it's going to be equal 1. The remainder, it's going to be equal to 0. Then after adding another 4 buttons to the next row, it's going to be 8 modulo 4. 8 divided by 4 is going to be 2, the remainder is 0, and so on. So here I'm just going to say the added buttons, modulo buttons per row, if that is equal to 0, then I'm going to add a new row to our input element. Now I will go to the next button here, and then I'm not going to add that button to the first row. Instead, I will need to add it to the new row, which is the last row. So I'm going to select the row first. Using the querySelector, I'm going to use its class name .row, but I need to select the last row, so each button is going to be added to the last row all the time. So I'm going to say here .row last child, and then after adding 7 to the last row, which is the second row, now the added buttons is 5, and here it's going to be f5 modulo 4 equals 0. This will return false. 5 modulo 4, it's going to be equal to 1. Then I will go to the next button. I will add it to the last row, which is this one, and it's gonna be here. So that's how we will add all the buttons to my input element. Now this code here will not work because it's not organized. So this is the first one to be executed. Then we select the row, then we add the button to the row, and then we increment the added buttons variable. Now we're going to talk about targeting the buttons. So I need to know which button here the user has clicked, right? So it's not a good way to add an event listener to all of these buttons. So I'm just gonna go and add an event listener to the whole element, which is the input element. So I'm going to add an event listener, which is the click event, and then I'm gonna pass the click event to an arrow function. Now whenever I click inside the input element, this will fire up this function here. Now if I take a look on the event when I click on one of these buttons here, this is what I get. Now just by looking at this, you will know exactly which button I clicked before I got this here on my console. So if I go here, it says target and it says a button, so I clicked on a button, and here it's the sign for an ID and it says division. So this says that I clicked on a button with an ID division, right? So that's what I need. I'm gonna say event.target, and I'm gonna set this to a constant called target button. And now all I need to do is to look for this button here, the button I clicked on, inside my calculator buttons array. So I'm going to use a forEach method, and then for each button I'm going to see if the button.name is the same as the target button that ID I clicked on. And then if this is true, I'm going to send that button here, this button here, which is an object that has these properties that I will need, to a function called calculator. So for our function calculator, when the user clicks on a button, for example 9, we will send that button here, which is an object, to our function calculator. Now inside my function calculator, what I will do is I'm going to check the button's type. So if you remember, each button there has a type. So I'm going to check if the button is a number from 0 to 9, or the pound or the decimal point, or a percent sign. And then if it's an operator, these operators, or if the button's type is a key, here it's going to be clear or delete, and then if it's the calculate button. Now what we're going to do is we need to save each button's click of the user into an array. So we're going to use an object here for our calculator data called data, and we have here two arrays, operation and result. So for example, if the user clicked on 9, a number here, what we're going to do is that we're going to push that number to our data.operation. So now our data.operation array, it's gonna have one element, which is 9, and then whatever is inside our data.operation array, we're going to update our output operation, which means just showing what's inside our data.operation array to our user in our operation element. So after the user clicked on 9, we push that 9 to the operation array, and then we take what is inside the operation array and set it to the inner HTML of our operation element. And also I'm going to push that number he clicked on to our result array. Now for the operation array is what we show to the user while he's typing on the calculator, but for the result array is what we use to calculate the result. Now when he clicks on 4, we're going to push the 4 number to the operation, and the same thing to the result, and of course we'll update the output operation. And then of course the same thing will happen if he clicked on the decimal point, for example. Now let's say the user wants to delete this dot here, so he will go and click on this button. So we are here. So what's going to happen when he click on the delete key here is just using the pop method here. What the pop method does is just removing the last element of an array. So for example, if I say data.operation.pop or data.result.pop, and then if I take a look on these operations, this is what I will get. So the dot is not there, the last element is not there anymore. And of course, after I updated the operation array, I also need to update the output operation element. Now let's say the user has clicked on clear. So in this case, all what we're going to do is set the operation and the result arrays to an empty array. And of course, after this, I will need to update my element here, the operation element. And because the operation array is empty, this means that we will show nothing here. And after the result here is empty, I'm going to update the output result with 0. Now let's say the user clicked on an operator. For example, if you clicked on the multiplication operator, we will go and update our operation and result arrays. For our operation here array, we're going to push the symbol, but for the result array, we're going to add the asterisk, the formula. So the symbol here is what we show for the user in this result element, but for the result array here is what we use to do the calculation. So when you do maths operations in our programming language in JavaScript, for multiplication we use the asterisk. Now when the user clicks on the calculate button, the first thing we're going to do is to join all the elements in our result array, which means, for example, if I have 9 and 4, if I join them with an empty string, this is what I will get: 9 and 4 joined with an empty string. And then I'm going to save this inside a variable called save, for example, and then I will pass this save here to a function, a built-in function called eval for evaluate. So the eval function here evaluates a JavaScript code represented as a string. So let's say we have this code here. Now if I put this JavaScript code here inside double quotes, now I represented this JavaScript code as a string. Now if I pass this to my function eval, the eval function will evaluate this code here. So this is what I will get. The exact same thing as executing this line of code without passing it to the evaluate function. Now if I go and, for example, pass for the eval function this string here, which is 4 times 5 minus 1, this will return 19. So the eval function is what we're going to use to build our calculator. Now before showing the result to the user, I'm going to save that result. So I'm going to push the result to my arrays operation and result. So let's say, for example, the user clicked on 2 times 5 and then he clicked on calculate. So in that case, I'm going to save that answer in the operation and result for later use. For example, he needs to multiply or to do some operations with that answer. And finally, I will show that result to the user. Okay, now we still need to do another step. Why? Because our result element here can take only 10 digits. If we have more than that, the numbers will go beyond the element. So to solve that, we're going to format the result. So first I'm going to create a constant called max output number length, which is 10. So when I get the result, for example, this number here, I will make this a string so I can use the length property that will return a number which is the length of our string, which is the length of our number here. We have two cases. The length is less than the maximum output number length, less than 10, or it's greater than 10. If it's less than 10, we're going just to show that in our result element, right? But if it's more than 10, what we're going to do is to check if our result is a float. Is float function will take in a number and then we'll return false if it's not a float, if it's an integer, and returns true if it's a float. Let's see an example. For example, 102 modulo 1 equals 0, and any other integer modulo 1 will be always equal to 0. But instead, any other float number modulo 1 will always be not equal to 0. So after this function here, we will have two options. It's an integer or it's going to be a float. Again, if it's a float, we'll have two cases there. If it's a number like this, where the length of the integer part, the number of the digits of the integer part, is greater than 10. And here, it's less than 10. We have just one number, for example. Now, if it's an integer, I'm going to use toPrecision method that will take in the output precision and then show that to the user. Output precision here is equal to 5. Now the toPrecision method here, what will this method do is this. For example, let's say we have this number here. This number has 15 digits. If this was our result, then the result.toPrecision will return this. 1.1226. We have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 digits. The output precision is 5. If it was 6, then we will have here 6 numbers. And then times e plus 14, which is just a way of saying 10 to the 14th. Now we're going to do the same thing if it's a float, but the length of the integer part is greater than 10. Now, if it's less than 10, we're going to use the toFixed method. So the toFixed method takes in the number of digits after the point, after the decimal point. So I think you already know what the toFixed method does. So for example, if I say result.toFixed 2, so the numbers that will be shown after the dot, after the decimal point, are going to be 2 numbers only. Now this number digits after pound is just the maximum output number length, which is 10, minus the result integer length. So the result integer here is just the integer part of the float number. In this case, it's 1. The length is how many digits are there. In this case, there are just 1. So for example, in this example, we have here 10 minus 1, which means 9. So we're going to show 1 here, and then after the dot, we're going to show 9 digits. So 9 digits and 1 are exactly 10. That's the capacity of our result element here. So that's it for our logic part. So I think we are ready to type in the code. First, if you are not already subscribed, hit the button and subscribe, and also hit the bell to get notified about every new video. So let's go and open our text editors. So to follow along with me, you will need to go first and download the starter template from the repo. You will find the link in the description. So I will go to the repo, and then under repos, I'm going to go and search for calculator JavaScript, and I'm going to download that as a zip file. Now I'm going to copy just the starter template and rename it calculator. And now I will go and open my text editor and open the project. Now I'll go into my index.html, and the first thing I will do is to link my style.css file to the HTML file. And then I will go and search for Google Fonts and search there for Poppins font. And I'm going to select this one here, regular 400, and I'm going to copy the link for the font. Then I'm going to set the title to calculator JavaScript. I'm going to run a live preview of the project. Now for the elements we will type in the code for all the devs. Here we have the output, then it's going to be operation inside the dev with the value, then result inside the value with 0 in its inner HTML, then our input. Now we need to link the script calculator.js. Now inside the link we have already calculator buttons array typed in, the code for the buttons. Then first I will select the elements using the querySelector method. So here for the output result element, it's going to be .result.value, and here for the operation, it's going to be the name, it's going to be operation, output operation element. Now I will need to create the calculating buttons. I'm going to need to create a function called createButtons. The number of the buttons per row, as we have seen before, are 4. The added buttons is initially set equal to 0. Now for each button inside our calculator buttons array, we are going to see if the added buttons modulo buttons per row is equal to 0. Then we said that, then we add a new dev with the class name row to our input element. Then we add, or we select the row, the last row element using that row last child, the CSS selector, and then we add to the inner HTML of the row, of the last row, the button, which its ID is the button, that name, and the inner HTML of that button is the button's symbol. Now after that we will increment the add buttons by 1. Now I will go and call the function createButtons, and it doesn't work. So in my console it says can't access property. Then I will need to go and check the HTML code in my inspector. Inside, I will need to go inside the input, of course, and I can see nothing because here I forgot to add a double quote. So now you can see all the buttons there. Actually, we don't need the index here as a parameter, we just need the button. So that's it for creating the buttons. Now I will need an add or an event listener for our input element, which is a click event. Then I will pass this event to an anonymous function. I will select the clicked button using the event.target. Now I will go and send that button to our calculator function. So here the calculator function will take in the object button from our calculator buttons array. Now for the calculator function, it will take in the button. So there, based on the button's type, if it's gonna be maybe an operator, or I'm just gonna copy this. It's gonna be maybe a number or a key, and finally calculate button. Here, if it's a key, it might be a clear button, or it's gonna be the delete button. Now here I will save the data inside an object called data with two arrays, operation and result. Now here I will need to push the button.symbol to the operation, but for the result it's going to be the formula. It's going to be the same thing for when it's a number. Now to clear, I'm just going to clear the arrays, set them to an empty array, And here to delete, we're going to use the pop method. Just like that, the pop method. Here, after clearing, we need to update the output result. And here we update the output operation. So we update the operation element with the array operation joined. Now for the functions, update output operation is going to be taking an operation, a string, and then set that string to the inner HTML of the operation element. Here, for the result one, it's going to take into a string and change the inner HTML of the result element. Now let's first check if that works. Okay, it's working. If I click on delete, right, now when I click on the calculate button, the first thing is to join the result array, joining all the elements using an empty string. Then I will need to evaluate that string using the eval function. Now the result here, I will show it to the user using the update output result. I will need here to clear the arrays, both the operation and the result, and then I'm going to push the result to those arrays. And then I'm going to say here return because I don't want to update the output operation. Here I need an open parentheses. Now let's check if this works. Now you can see that if I add 5, you can see that it's working just fine. Okay. Now I will try to remove and then click on calculate, and it's working. Now let's see what will happen if I type in a very long number. So for example, more than 10 numbers or 10 digits. So you can see that it's going beyond the result element. So here we need to format that result. So I'm going to format the result before I show that to the user. So my function here, the format result, will take in the result returned by the evaluate function. First we need to create the digit counter function that will just take in a number, then make it a string, and then use the length property. So if I try that, so you can see here that it shows the number of the digits. Now I'm going to create a constant called maximum output number length, which is going to be equal to 10, and then another constant called output precision, which is going to be equal to 5. Now if the digit counter of our result is greater than maximum output, and here else, if it's less than 10, we're just gonna return the result. Now if it's a float, and here else, if it's an integer, then we need first to create the as float number function. Is float function will take in a number and then returns the number modulo 1 not equal to 0. Now let's check if it's working. So here it's not a float, it's a float, true, and it's not a float. Right, so here if it's a float, I will need to get the integer part of that float. So I'm gonna use the parseInt to pass the float to an integer, and then I need to calculate the length of that integer. So I'm going to use the digit counter function. Now if the result integer length is greater than 10, I'm going to return the result that toPrecision, and it will take in 5, the output precision. Else now, if the result integer length is less than 10, I'm going to use toFixed here, toFixed method. So the number of digits after pound is just the maximum minus result integer length. Now if it's an integer, I'm just gonna go and use the toPrecision method. Now let's check if that's working. I'm going to type in a very long number and click on calculate. Now you can see that it's formatted. Now I'm going to type in a small number. It's working. I'm going to type in a float number with the integer part is length is less than 10. So you can see that it's working. Now I'm going to type in a float number, but with the integer part length is greater than 10. And you can see that it's working just fine. Now, one last thing we didn't talk about in the logic part is errors. So for example, if I see 12 minus 10 times 9, 6, this will be a syntax error. So I'm going to handle that using the try catch here. So I'm going to say try, then I'm going to pass in this result eval. So if this catches any errors, and if that error is an instance of syntax error, if it's a syntax error, then I'm going to set the result equal to syntax error, and then I'm going to update the output result with syntax error and then return. So let's try that again. I'm going to say 5 minus times 6, and it is showing syntax error. So that's it guys for this tutorial. This is the end. I hope you liked this tutorial. If you do, thumbs up. And one thing, after this, don't forget, I will make a scientific tutorial based on this code here. Based on this tutorial, I will make another tutorial, and we will create in that a scientific calculator, like a more advanced calculator of this one here. It's gonna be easy if you follow the tutorial or this tutorial. Okay, take care and see you in the next tutorial.